morning, good afternoon, good evening. Sorry, tonight we are 30 minutes behind our usual schedule of 6 p.m. UK time, 8 p.m. Zimbabwean time. Nonetheless, thanks very much, Benjamin, for coming. Tonight's topic is the recent Benin coup. Some people are seeing the increasing number of coups and are looking at, or are rather asking the question, is Africa beginning to see military coup as the panacea to Africa's teething problem of bad governance? The other issue that must be considered here is, in the historic context, Africa has the habit, the knack for taking the medicine that proves worse than the disease they're trying to cure. Is military coup yet another example of a medicine that is going to prove more deadly than the disease that they're trying to cure? Welcome to the program, Ben. I don't know what your take on that one is, and then we can listen to Professor Lumumba's take on that issue.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. I believe, military coups, they have since taken, center stage. I mean, we are seeing them more often than before. We are we also include those failed attempts because we know Guinea-Bissau just had a failed military coup attempt. We are seeing almost all change of governments that are coming through in Africa, particular. There has been a military coup in most of them, and I believe there's a serious now, a question that needs to be asked and we need answers. Are we then saying that, we have failed to uphold democracy and now we are choosing or we are opting for coups instead, to see any change in leadership or change in government? It's the times that we are living in, and I think it really needs that that answer to this whole problem that is happening in Africa.
Well, let's listen to what Professor Lumumba's take is on this issue of the Benin coup.
Coup d'etats are now becoming the way of solving problems, particularly in what sometimes is referred to as Francophone Africa? The answer is simple. Many of these countries in the so-called Francophone Africa are controlled from Paris. People can pretty much predict what is going to happen. People are getting tired, they are getting poorer, their leaders are getting richer. And the people in the military are now seeing themselves as the saviors because the ballot has failed. And that is the context in which what happened in Benin happened. Of course, I know there'll be attempts at sending a very clear message by punishing the coup, those who attempted the coup. But let us not speculate. Let us wait and see. Remember that ECOWAS has found itself in a very difficult situation in the recent past. They have found themselves in a difficult situation in the cases of the coups that we know about in Guinea, in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina, and of course, recently in Guinea-Bissau. And what they have done very quickly without much thought and assessment, in my view, is to say, we are not going to cooperate with you. And how did the Sahelian countries respond? They responded by saying, we are withdrawing from ECOWAS, and they did in the month of January this year. Burkina withdrew, Mali withdrew, and Niger withdrew. And initially, what they tried to do, particularly in the case of Niger, was to threaten military action. And they are now coming out very firmly because they fear that if this trend continues, and it may very well continue, then ECOWAS will have very few members, because these countries that are going through these processes will then want to join what they are considering to be a more progressive alliance, which is being created in the Sahel. So ECOWAS is trying to redeem itself by saying we must do something. And you could see that this is much more reminiscent of what they did in the case of Yahya Jammeh in the Gambia. And Nigeria perhaps is a little bit more concerned this time round because this is too close to home. So that you have a situation where in the north you have Niger, and you are now beginning to have attempts which are too close to home. And I think people are getting worried, even in spaces such as Nigeria, because coup d'etats are sometimes copycat. People see it has happened there. The ballot is not working. Why don't we save the people? So they are the latter-day saviors. So we see an attempt at redemption by the ECOWAS group, led as it must be by Nigeria.
I'll stop it there. I think my first response to that is to correct the repeated mistake that has been made by many people, which is to claim that the ballot has not worked, democracy has not worked. This is a contradiction. In a country like Zimbabwe, we have all acknowledged, and on this platform we have said it, if we have said it once, we have said it 1,000 times, that Zimbabwe has failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections for the last 45 years. We cannot call the fact that we just hold regular elections, which we all know are flawed, which at the end of the day we all agree were rigged. And then we turn around and say that's democracy. That is not democracy. We have not paid attention to what is required for a healthy and functioning democracy, and pursued it and made sure that that happened. And then we turn around and say, it's because democracy has failed. I think that is one of the most unfortunate arguments one has heard repeatedly. And some of these people who are saying democracy have worked and a military coup is the answer, they base their arguments on that very point. We've tried democracy, it has not worked. But you have not tried democracy. Some of them you don't even know what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections. And some of them, you have participated in flawed elections when you have been repeatedly warned that, in our case, ZANU-PF is rigging the elections. And secondly, if you participate, you're only giving legitimacy to the vote-rigging ZANU-PF. I think that point must be made and made emphatically clear. Do not pretend that democracy has failed when what you have heard all along is not democratic elections.
You took the words right out of my mouth. You know, there is a very big difference between, practicing democracy and just simply just saying or creating an image. I mean, I'll give you two contrasts. The elections that we saw that were held in South Africa and the elections that were held in Zimbabwe, or let's say Tanzania, or Mozambique. The South African election, as things were happening, even the command center itself, you didn't have to be in there to see that everybody was making sense of what was what was happening around them and around their country. And at the end of the day, everybody knew and totaled what the results were and what was presented. It made sense and everybody was happy. And of course there was no outright winner, and they had to go into coalitions. That is fine. That is part of the constitution. In the case of Zimbabwe or Mozambique and Tanzania, the opposition from the very first word go, they were underdogs. There were police stopping rallies. You had no verified voters roll. You had so many irregularities that even SADC itself, the regional body, could not make sense of what was happening. And in the end, they gave a report to Zimbabwe and said that our elections, they failed to meet up to our own constitutional demands. They failed to meet international demands of free, fair, and credible elections. You go to Tanzania, where the election is happening, people are demonstrating, and all the other opposition parties that were very relevant were either jailed or disqualified. So it was a one-man show. And that one-man horse ran and won by 98%, a figure that has never been heard of before. Go to Mozambique, you find out that Zimbabwean nationals were given IDs to cross over the border and go and vote in Mozambique, and so many other irregularities. You cannot then say in these three countries, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and Mozambique, democracy has failed. There was never democracy in the first place. Having elections does not mean democracy. Having free, fair, and credible elections means you are practicing democracy, giving people a say, giving people a meaningful say in who governs the country next. So this whole idea to say a military coup is the next step when democracy fails, I think is nonsense. Just because you have bought the wrong shoe size, you cannot totally say that shoes are no good. I mean, you put on the shoe that fits your foot. You buy the shoe that fits your foot. Democracy, there is standards that you need to uphold, to achieve. Now, if you're going to shortchange it, and then you want it to appear, you're only kidding yourself. And this is what most African countries are doing. They simply hold elections just to show the world that, we did it. But at the end of the day, the results were long, concluded. This is the case with Zimbabwe. So many times we've warned on this platform, participating in rigged elections is foolishness. Why? Because ZANU PF already has the outcome. ZANU PF has already won those elections. What you are just doing is rubber stamping and giving it a bill of health to say, well, Zimbabweans accepted it. It's fine. So again, I would say I would disagree with Professor Lumumba there and say we cannot say democracy has failed. We have failed democracy. We have failed to uphold democracy.
Well, one of the reasons why coup have appealed to some people here in Africa is that they've seen what happened in Burkina Faso, particularly, where the young Ibrahim Traore has really changed that country and changed it for the better. And they believe that could happen in our country too. It is tempting. But a country like Zimbabwe, we cannot deny that we don't know about military coups. 2017, we had a military coup. Before that, in 2008, we had the electoral coup, which stepped in to nullify the opposition's electoral victory. And the gentleman, VP Chiwenga, was involved. And he was again involved in the military coup of 2017. And in our case, we have to admit that the 2017 military coup succeeded in removing one dictator only to replace him with another dictator. Recently, there's been a lot of passion, a lot of heat, a noise generated by war veteran Blessed Runesu Geza bombshell. In January this year, he was the one who stood up and said to Mnangagwa's proposal to stay in office until 2030, it was bullshit. And people rallied around him. He claimed that he had the military behind him, and those people who supported him cheered. They were willing to see another military coup take place. The only problem with it, of course, as we said at the time, Geza and company, all they wanted to do was replace Mnangagwa with Chiwenga. Chiwenga has a well-documented history He is corrupt, incompetent, and a thug in his own right. Like I said before, he was involved in the electoral coup of 2008, and he was also involved in the military coup of 2017. I said at the beginning of this discussion that Africa sometimes has the habit of taking the medicine that proves to be more deadly than the disease they want to cure. Swapping one dictator for another did not cure Zimbabwe's problem of bad governance. It only gave us one dictator for another and helped perpetuate the dictatorship itself. The so-called Geza revolution would have done no better. It would have replaced one dictator, Mnangagwa, with another dictator, Chiwenga. And certainly in Zimbabwe, a military coup is not the solution. We need to make democracy work. And what is so disappointing about this is that it is not rocket science. We already have said on this platform and on many other platforms, many people have said that you cannot keep on participating in flawed elections because all you're doing is give the process legitimacy. Why would ZANU-PF implement reforms if they can get away with the flawed electoral process? And if you participate, you are giving legitimacy to the flawed process. Both SADC and the AU election observers condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections as flawed and illegal. They would have gone one step further and denied ZANU-PF political legitimacy if Zimbabweans had not participated in that flawed election in their millions. And for that, we have to blame Chamisa. Chamisa lied to the people of Zimbabwe, telling them that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Triple C was going to win big. He was preparing to form the next government because that was God's plan, and God's plan does not fail. He was lying all the time. And the tragedy is the people of Zimbabwe failed to realize it at the time. And many of them, even today, are refusing to accept that Chamisa is a liar and a conman. That presents a serious problem because it means he can repeat it come 2028. We already can say we have had 45 years of rigged elections. That's why we are in this political mess. But if Chamisa is his way, in 2028, the nation will be saying we have had 48 years of rigged elections. That may be the excuse some people would want to use to push this agenda of a military coup as a solution. I would like to repeat, we don't need a military coup. We just need to make sure that our democratic system works. Thank you very much, those who were able to join us this evening, and I hope you'll be able to do it again tomorrow. Have a good night.